So I worked at this cafe, and typically I was the person who would take your order up front, but there were unfortunately plenty of times I was subjected to whipping up that quad shot half cap oat milk latte with 2 pumps vanilla, 3 pumps caramel, 1 pump brown sugar cinnamon, and 1 serving of honey cold foam on top. So I worked at that cafe for about a year and a half, which in all honesty is entirely too long. But, there were some shitty parts about that job. My coworkers tended to never be one of them. They all were pretty reasonable individuals. They weren't necessarily people I would typically be buddy with. And, there was one or two exceptions, but none of those friendships were concrete and built to last. And one of those guys, let's just call him Brad. Brad was built like a fucking stick, but he was generally a pretty chill dude. And I'd say we mainly got along because we played Xbox and none of the other coworkers really gamed like that. We also enjoyed sparking that fish whistle from time to time. And we only kicked it like that for a couple months because he ended up changing his job, and then his half sister who we lived with, she had a fucking orbit of her own. But she tried to get freaky with me one time when we all went to the club, and even though I sidestepped that shit like Neo from the Matrix, I guess it still kind of made it awkward for him every time I came over and she looked at me like those Martians looking at the fucking claw. Me and Brad, though, we both kind of had a similar taste for adventure, and the cool kind, the kind where you walk into abandoned buildings or construction sites in the middle of the night. This time we were making our way down the tracks that were kind of close to where we worked. And we didn't go in completely blind, so we knew where the railway would return to civilization. And honestly, nothing too eventful on the walk itself happened, minus what you would expect from a railway, some homeless camps and some good old needles on the ground. Along the way to the return of the modern world, there was this bridge we had to cross. And honestly, it probably wasn't a fantastic idea to walk across this bridge for two reasons. First, it was made of wood. And I don't know if that really matters when it comes to the integrity of it. It was probably well built, but I'm already a chicken shit when it comes to heights, so logically it being made of wood just made things a little worse. Secondly, there was only enough for Thomas the Tank Engine himself. So if we saw that train coming, we either needed to run across the side of this thing or jump into the lake. And this wasn't some short bridge either. This bridge had some serious length to it. If I recall correctly, it took us like good 5 minutes to walk across it. It wasn't something that you'd really want to be caught on. And our other option, of course, was jumpily when you go to take a dive, your phone and wallet aren't still in your inventory. But luckily, we didn't have to do the Usain Bolt or Michael Phelps challenge, and we made it across that with no bitch ass train to get in our way. For the bridge did pose one more problem. That bridge wasn't exactly what you would call hidden by any stretch, really. There were multiple areas where the general public could just look at it. And they weren't just like places you could kind of see the bridge out of the corner of your eye. No, these were places where the public loves to hang out. Quite a few people probably got a front row seat to our stupidity. But after another mile of trekking, we could finally see that break in the forest. We were very quickly reminded that we have returned to the land of law and order. There were two squad cars parked at the road right by the tracks with their lights on. And once I saw that, truth be told, I started sweating a little because I had a card on me, and possession of that at this time, in this state, wasn't exactly something that you would win the key to the city with. And after noticing those pretty blue and red lights, I saw an officer walking towards us on these tracks. Once we got to the point where our paths met, he obviously stopped us, and it was to inform us that that railroad was private property, and I was under the assumption that he'd be mad that we were on this highly dangerous bridge, but I suppose being stupid isn't a crime. After he informs us that if we're caught on this railroad again, we will be charged with trespassing, in which case he needed our names, and so my good friend Brad gives him his name. And then the officer asks for Brad's identification. And Brad says, I don't have it. Now, I know that's bullshit. Brad, not even 5 minutes before we walked onto those train tracks, bought a pack of cigarettes in which he was carded for. And when he said he didn't have his ID, the light bulb popped on in my head. And I remembered our boy Brad had a bench warrant. And if you don't know what a bench warrant is, it doesn't mean they're gonna have SEAL Team 6 come to your house and arrest you on some John Gotti charges. But if a cop does happen to stop you for some reason and they see you have one, they're taking your ass in. And I'm pretty sure the only reason he had it was he was late on his child support. It made sense to me at that point why he didn't want to give him the ID, because if he gave the ID, the cop would go run it, and that would give the cop an excuse to have us stay here and wait. And so when the cop obviously asked me, "What's your name?" I tell him my name, and I tell him I also don't have my identification on me. You can see the suspicion come over his face. But like stupidity, suspicion isn't a crime. Now, he straight tells us to our face he finds that to be odd that two fully grown adults don't have any form of identification of at all. We basically both just kind of agree with him. We kind of tell him, yeah, isn't that kind of odd? And after he lets us go, because he really didn't have anything on us, he already gave us the warning, so he can't slap us with anything more than that up to this point. We knew he was going to look us up, even though we didn't have the IDs, because he did write our names down. And when he did that, we needed to be out of Dodge. And so the moment we got out of his sight, we hit that supersonic racing speed and we made it to this shitty little park that was kind of concealed by the woods. We heard sirens later, but I don't know if that was for someone else or they pulled up Brad's file and figured out he hadn't been paying his child support, but who knows. Anyways, we get to the park and Brad pages his girlfriend. She pulls up and acts as our getaway driver to get us back to Brad's crib. When we got back to his place, we toked, but nothing really outside of that. We got a couple drinks, but that's about it. Anyways, if you've gotten this far, I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Continue to watch. Tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your dog, tell your grandma, and tell them to